We are gathered here today on Yom Hazikaron, the Day of Remembrance, at the Israeli Embassy here in Pretoria, in order to honor and to pay tribute to the memory of the victims of terror and to fallen soldiers. There are really two stories that we honor today. The one is the story of the victims of jihadi terror who died not in the name of the establishment of a Palestinian state, nor about borders, because those could have been achieved at any point in recent Israeli history. But they died because they were Jews, because they were determined and described and thought of as the infidel by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by Iran, by all of the jihadi forces in the region. And the second story is the story of bravery and courage of those who fought to defend, the brave soldiers of a civilian army in a proud democracy against the monstrous terrorists who seek so much harm. And these two stories that we mark today on Yom HaZikaron are relevant immediately to South Africa and to Africa, because indeed, in the same way that a war is being waged in defense of innocent people in Israel, there is a jihadi war being waged against the infidel here on this continent in Africa, a continent that is deeply religious, as the words that we know from our own anthem, Nkosi Sikaleli Africa, may God protect Africa. And that war is being waged on multiple fronts by the ideological brothers in arms of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, it is Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, ISIS, across the northern border, just from where we are standing right here in Pretoria. ISIS Mozambique is waging a war, murdering Christians, going from village to village. In the DRC, just a few weeks ago, more than 70 Christians were marched into a church and beheaded. Over Easter, in Nigeria, tens and tens of Christians were murdered, hundreds of homes burned. And so, indeed, what is the war that Israel is waging today is not a war which is only about the state of Israel and the Jewish people. It is about the global war against jihadi terror. There is a famous slogan which has been posted on social media and which is well known, which says, "Today the Saturday people, tomorrow the Sunday people." And friends, tomorrow is now. And so on this Yom HaZikaron, it is appropriate, and in this context, to say that there should be a closer alliance between Africa and Israel in this mutual enemy and this war to defend human dignity and human freedom. And there needs to be a much closer alliance between South Africa and Israel. And so in this context, on this Yom HaZikaron here at the Israeli Embassy, I think it is appropriate to make the call that it is time for the South African government, this government of national unity, to send an ambassador, a South African ambassador to Israel. It is time for Israel to send its ambassador back to South Africa. Now is the time, because there are certain moments of change in history. And here I would like to refer to one of the great speeches in modern history, when Prime Minister Harold Macmillan came to South Africa in 1960, and he addressed the South African Parliament on the 3rd of February 1960 in Cape Town. And he made a famous speech that became known as the Wind of Change. And he said, and I quote, "The wind of change is blowing through this continent. Whether we like it or not, this growth of national consciousness is a political fact." And with that, Prime Minister Macmillan indicated a shift in British policy that would be a move towards granting independence to their African colonies. And he used the occasion as well to criticize the apartheid policies of the South African government. And indeed, friends, there is a wind of change blowing through South Africa today. The government of national unity is evidence of that. The ANC is in decline. But more than that, There is a spirit of reform. South Africans want change. All of the polls from SRF, from the Institute of Race Relations and other think tanks and academics in our country show that South Africans want economic growth, they want economic reform, they want an end to race laws. But what they really want is a closer relationship between South Africa and Israel and the West. In fact, the words of Harold Macmillan could not be more apposite. Like it or not, the South African government needs to note that it is a political fact that South Africans want a closer relationship with Israel. And now is the time. The government of national unity needs to realize it represents millions of Christians across the length and breadth of this country. It represents the interests of the people of South Africa. Now is the time for the government of national unity to send an ambassador to Israel. And now is the time for Israel to send an ambassador back to South Africa, to take advantage of the pressure being applied by the United States government to work with an incoming strong United States ambassador to apply pressure on the South African government to realign with the West and with values of freedom and democracy, to be truthfully a government that will speak in the name of the civilized values of this country and to represent the wind of change sweeping through this continent and sweeping through this country. And friends, this is not just about politics. The closer alliance between Israel, the United States and South Africa, and indeed, it is a three-way partnership. And the government of national unity needs to realize that if it really wants to repair ties with the United States government, a place to start would be to send an ambassador back to Israel. It's not just about politics. It is about the values which are at stake that we mark and honor today on Yom Hazikaron. Because why did the victims of terror die? Why have these brave soldiers of the civilian army, of the IDF, the most ethical and moral army in the world, why did they die? They died not only to defend a piece of land and not only to defend Jewish nationalism, they died in the name of the values that underpin Jewish society and civilization, and indeed the civilization of the Western liberal free democracies. Because indeed, the Saturday people and the Sunday people believe in the book of Genesis that declares that God created the human being in his image, or as we say in Hebrew, B'Tselem Elokim. To be created in the image of God means that the human being is a source and has an independent right to dignity, to freedom. And indeed, that is what the founders of the United States declared in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, amongst them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This means, because the United States Constitution was also the founding document and the inspiration for the South African Constitution and all forms of freedom and democracy in the West, the founding idea is that God created all human beings equal in his image, and that human rights come from a belief in the independence and the sovereignty and the indestructible holiness and sacredness of the human spirit created in God's image. And that holiness and sacredness is irrespective of color, creed, belief. No matter who you are and no matter what you believe, you are entitled to dignity and to freedom and to respect, because we are all created in God's image. Even those that we may disagree with from a perspective of religious principle. And that is where the war, the jihadi war, is being waged at the moment, is on the spirit of God in every human being, because at the heart of its philosophy is that if you are the infidel, you have no right to life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. And so war is being waged against the infidel by the jihadi forces led by Iran, by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by Boko Haram, El-Shabaab, ISIS. A war, a savage war, is being waged against the spirit of God created in every single human being. And what Yom HaZikaron shows is that the one mistake that the founders of the United States Constitution made when they formed these words is that they said, We hold these truths to be self-evident. Indeed, these truths are not self-evident. They have to be defended. They have to be articulated. They have to be fought for. History has shown that there will always be enemies of this idea, which is indeed a radical idea of the fundamental equality of all human beings created in God's image. The Nazis went to war against the Spirit of God in every human being. The Soviet Union and communism went to war against the Spirit of God in every human being. And now global jihad has gone to war against the Spirit of God created in every human being. And what Yom HaZikaron teaches is that for this to be defeated, it needs to be fought for. Those victims of terror, whose memory we honor today, died as heroes, not as victims, because they chose to live as proud Jews in the land of Israel, in the promised land, in the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They chose to be part of the rebuilding and the reestablishment of Jewish sovereignty across the length and breadth of the land of Israel, including our eternal capital in Jerusalem. They chose to live their lives without the fear, and they died because they were regarded by the enemy as the infidel. And so they gave their lives, as our sages would say, al kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of God's name, died as heroes. And the brave soldiers of the civilian army of the IDF, reservists, who give everything and sacrifice everything, the families who are grieving today on this Yom HaZikaron across Israel, they are grieving and mourning for their fallen sons and daughters who gave up everything to defend the state of Israel. But they have done so in this holy cause, to defend the cause of freedom, of human dignity, of the Tselem Elokim, of the image of God, of the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel and to the city of Jerusalem, and to the values that society is founded upon, the values of the human spirit created in God's image. And so on this Yom HaZikaron, now is the time for all civilized nations to come together in defense of these values. Now is the time for South Africa, for this government of national unity, for all of our fellow citizens to ensure that this country takes its rightful place on the right side of history, to recognize that there is indeed a wind of change sweeping this country and this continent, and to realize that history is calling and that God himself is calling, and that we need to live with the vision of what the South African anthem says, Inkosi Sikaleli Africa, that may God bless Africa, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people lives, Od Avinu Chai, our Father in heaven lives. God bless you and thank you.